Florida State lands a familiar name from the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you to the everydayers that make this a great show. Please hit the like and subscribe button and share this podcast, rate and review. And if you have a chance, please comment on YouTube. Today's show is going to feature a key player coming back to Florida State from the transfer portal. We're going to talk some recruiting as a big prediction was put in for the Noles. And we're going to talk a little bit about the overall portal rankings and why Florida State's class is probably even better than some of the experts think. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Sometimes players come back around. Omarian Cooper came to Florida State, played in 21 and 22, transferred to play with Deion at Colorado, and now he is back headed towards Tallahassee. Cornerback, long kid, played at Lehigh Acres down in Southwest Florida, just outside of Fort Myers. He could be a player that could be an X factor for the Noles. We've said it many times on this show, and I'm sure most of you know, Florida State has a pretty crowded defensive back room. So it's interesting that they took him, but it's not a bad idea to have depth, especially when that young man already knows your system. He played in it for 2 years, and he actually started some games. So let's go over a few of the numbers for Cooper. Let's start with the 2021 season, and I look at just snaps as arguably the most important category, as crazy as that might seem. His total snaps, 267 in 2021 as a freshman. That's not too bad. He also had an opportunity to start a few games against Miami, BC, and Florida. He's a young man that kind of thrown to the fire, if you will. Like those last few games, that's not easy getting into that situation. He was targeted a little bit, but didn't do too bad. Ironically, his first start came against Miami. He was targeted 8 times and only gave up 2 completions. So 5 completions on the year out of 16 throws. He's not too bad to start off. And then 2022, he came back and he played more. I think he was banged up a little bit more, but he started 3 games early in the year, then started a game later at Syracuse, played in a bunch of games, played 308 snaps. Again, played cornerback mostly for the Noles. He had an opportunity to do some other things, but the most important thing here is you're getting a player that's played 2 years in your system. He's a long guy, 6 foot, 6'1", 190 pounds. You could move him to safety or nickel. Maybe there's some thoughts about whether Cooper does that, because with Greedy Vance taking off for Southern Cal, there's a little bit of a lull on trying to figure out, okay, who is the guy that's going to be that spot? Because it's a critical one. If you don't have good nickel play, especially if somebody gets hurt, like Earl Little goes down or somebody else, who's going to play that role? Maybe Cooper can play some there, or Cooper could play one of the other corner spots. He played the left corner spot for the Noles a couple of years ago. Maybe he slides in and plays a little more at that spot again, and somebody else moves to nickel. Bottom line, Florida State's getting a valuable asset that's from Florida, plays corner. Obviously, it's a critical position for each and every football team. And the Noles are going to get another athlete. Florida State is rather deep at DB, so I am curious about how they're going to use him, but this is good. And before I go further, this is another example of how winning at the portal isn't just gaining the elite 5-star guy. Somebody that's going to fit into your locker room, especially when you've got a chance to make another run at the playoff. I think that's a big part of this. Mike Norvell, his coaching staff, and everybody in that room that goes in and does meetings before the players get there, etc. They're not going to bring in somebody this late in the game after spring ball unless it's a really valuable commodity. And that doesn't mean tackles, interceptions, etc. That means team fit. That means team locker room, something I have harped on numerous times. I admit it here lately because a lot of other teams outside of Florida State have struggled with it. Why, I don't know, but too many teams are taking flyers on kids and getting burned. Ironically, it's Colorado is one of those programs. Not that Cooper is one of them, but so that place is a revolving door, and I'll talk about them in a little bit. But this is another example of how you can get a good player. Doesn't necessarily have to be an elite guy, but that can help you overall, special teams, be a backup, whatever it ends up being, and you're better off as a team, and that young man still gets an opportunity to get his degree and move forward too. Like there are, 2 or 3 guys in this past draft for the Noles a few weeks ago that if you said something to me 2 years ago about, hey, so-and-so is going to get drafted, I don't know about that. That's probably what I would have said. But now they're in the NFL. So Florida State's also developed some guys other teams didn't have a lot of success with. Cooper was a solid player at Colorado, but he missed more tackles, etc. I think Florida State's coaching staff's better. He'll get back on track in Tallahassee and be a valuable commodity. So with that, I want you to think about it. How many times do you always just have to go for the stud? Or can you get good players and have a tremendous overall roster and depth and still get to where you want to go? I personally think it's both, especially in today's college football world with guys changing so much. Having continuity and having depth is very, very important, not just because of injuries, but because most rosters, even Florida State's always in flux because they do use the portal quite a bit. If you don't find that right fit, it's not going to work. And last point on Cooper, they're not going to bring somebody in that DB room that doesn't have a lot of talent because they'd be wasting the kids' time. Florida State, one could argue, has the best overall defensive back room for this next season. Certainly top 5, in my opinion, nationally. Where you want to rank them, that's up to you. But again, Cooper wouldn't be coming in just for the heck of it. Norvell and his crew wouldn't do that. It's stupid. Just saying. Coming up next, we're going to talk about a player that has been predicted to sign with Florida State. And we're going to talk about that in a perspective of something that I've been trying to see if it could change a little bit in the last couple of years. And that's because it's an offensive tackle. That's next here at Locked On Seminoles. FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home the big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on the spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Are you tired of watching Fox and ESPN and all these other TV stations each day because they're yelling and screaming back at you? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube and free on Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. So let's talk a little bit about Josh Petty. Who is he, etc. Offensive tackle on the north side of Atlanta, plays at a small school in Roswell. He's kind of the guy that's the enigma that's always fun for me to try to evaluate, but it's difficult to see what's going to happen. Petty's 6'5", 250 or so, and he could probably play tackle, center, or guard, depending on how big he gets. That's the one knock. He's not the biggest guy in the world. I was told he's around 250 right now, although he's listed a little bit more than that. I think that this is a kid because of his feet. He could play about anywhere in the country and be fine. And his offer list will say that. The only school that's a little iffy on him, ironically, is Georgia, which is right down the road. They prefer to take kids that are overweight because they run their offensive linemen so much and bring them down in weight. That's just the way they do it. We'll see how that goes for a guy like Petty if he ends up going there, but he's probably more of a backup plan for Georgia. But Florida State just got a prediction for him to go play for the Noles. This is something they've really not done a great job of. Elite offensive linemen in terms of the rankings. They haven't grabbed a lot of these guys in the last few years. A few, but not a ton. And here's the list right now for Petty on his official visits. Got these off on 3. May 28th, he's got Georgia Tech. Right after, bang, bang, he's got Clemson May 31st. June 7th, he's going to go to Tennessee. Right before that, he's going to Auburn, so another back-to-back. And then Florida State, 2 weeks later, will be a single visit on June 21st. This is an interesting development. He's been recruited by everybody. Notre Dame and schools up north, schools out west. He can pretty much go where he wants. Maybe Florida State's success this past year, as we've talked about, is a big reason for Petty leaning this direction. I mean, it's Wilt Fong and those guys talking about this, so That's an important thing to put in here. It's not just anybody making it. It's Wilfong. So that's important. And also, this is something else. Florida State, in their heyday, when it didn't matter the position, when they were really rolling, the Atlanta area and even southern and central parts of Georgia, they constantly got really good players, beat UGA, beat Tennessee, beat Georgia Tech, beat Auburn, etc. for these players' services. They started that trend last year at a high level and did great. Cam Davis, etc. They fended off different teams to get him, and that's just one example. But they need to get 4 or 5 elite Georgia players every year. If they can get offensive tackles to add into that mix, all Florida State fans should be very happy. Again, he's a versatile kid, listed as a tackle, but I think he could play guard or center. I know Georgia thinks that he might be a center, so he's somebody they got on their radar. But again, it's eye of the beholder on which position a young man will play, how big is he going to get, etc. There are a lot of different things there. I just love his feet. I wish he played against better competition in high school. He's playing against small school comps, so he's running over guys. I get it. But I'm looking at the measurables and the feet. Worst case scenario, this is going to be a really quick guy that can run a lot of zone, get out on the perimeter, and be a great blocker on those slip screens. Florida State does a great job with it. RPO game. And he's even somebody that's probably going to help you in different ways because if somebody gets banged up, he could play a different spot. He's versatile. That's very key. Maybe somebody like Maurice Smith isn't going to be around in a year or so. He's obviously leaving after this next season. Who's the next guy? We don't know. Maybe the Petty could be that guy in 2 or 3 years. Hard to say, but maybe center is his spot. With his feet, his frame, anything is possible. 6'4", 6'5", 250, and very athletic. The only thing that I'm really curious about is why these schools, he didn't take any visits to some of the schools further away. So maybe that was the edge for Florida State because Georgia's not like prioritizing. I'm just curious about it. Doesn't really matter. But then again, that's also a good sign for Florida State that not only he could sign, but he would stick. That's the other point here. Florida State, and I'll talk about this a little bit more with the transfer portal rankings here in a minute. Florida State has done a tremendous job of finding kids that fit them. And that's been my biggest take over the last couple months. I mentioned it in almost every show. Petty, for the way that especially Florida State's run game works in conjunction with the RPO, Petty's a great fit. It's not even in question for me. I think that will be a tell sign on where he goes. Georgia Tech will use that quite a bit. That's a visit. Clemson certainly uses it. Teams that are mobile, it really try to do things like that with their linemen. Petty would be good at any of those schools. But Florida State out of that group is also the best program right now. No offense to Clemson. They're down a little bit to me. I don't think they're as good as Florida State anymore. That's just my opinion based on the rosters, but we shall see. Before I move on to the next segment, note that if you get Petty, let's say he commits early mid-July or June, that could also speed up the process for other offensive linemen. Every team, especially if you look at the portal right now, the complaining that I'm hearing from coaches and whatnot, where the tackles and stuff, there aren't. You better not miss on offensive line recruiting out of the high school ranks, which is like jumping on a grenade and expecting it to go well. O-line is extremely difficult to project from high school to college level because so much of it is based on growth projection. And good luck with that because that means what the kid does, even though he's told him how to make it work, you're still waiting on a 17 to 21-year-old to build his body. And a lot of kids that age, even if they have all the advantages known to man, will find a way to mess that up. So you're guessing a little bit, but the more bullets you have in the gun, one of my favorite phrases, the more likely you are to hit your target. Petty is a guy that I think he's as close as you can get outside of the weight to what you're looking for Florida State. So if he commits, that could put pressure on some other guys. They're in on a bunch. I'm going to do an O-line recruiting feature fairly soon, but I want to see a few more visits lined up either for Florida State or they didn't, and kind of talk about it overall because O-line is very complex. If they can hit the home run down the stretch with O-line recruiting, this can be a top 5 to top 8 class. If not, it probably won't be. But they've got enough guys on the board that it's a possibility because that's one of the Achilles heels for this program, along with defensive end over the last few years and maybe linebacker, just getting enough numbers. And Petty, not only is it a number, it's an elite player. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the transfer portal, how it's rated, and my views on it, and why Florida State's a little bit higher than what some other people have. That's next here at Locked On Seminoles. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for your role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professional for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't use another job board. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So how would you rate the transfer portal now that it's closed? Where does Florida State stand? Who were some of the other teams that kind of stick in your memory as, okay, this is a team that I keep seeing them getting guys who fit needs, who fit their locker room? I'm going to bring it up again. It's the most important thing, I think, right now in college football, and that's culture. Are you taking mercenaries or are you taking good players? I'll just be blunt. Too many kids got agents. I'm going to go into a story about that in a minute and why Florida State's been a little smarter than some other people, doing better due diligence, and basically finding kids that not only help their program, but don't screw it up and burn an opportunity to get a good player. So here are a few schools, and I know there are a ton. I could go through 40 schools and not be done because the portal impacts every institution in the Power Four. But nonetheless, I'm just going to mention a few because these are some of the teams that not only took several good portal players, but they have a chance to make a run at a college football playoff berth and maybe even a top 5 seed. So I'm just going to kind of go at a random order here and just talk about it in general. Colorado has the most. They have over 30 kids from the portal they've signed. Deion, I heard from a recruit this past week, told him he's only going to take 8 high school kids this year. That's ridiculous. Terrible, terrible decision. You cannot win only with the portal. Cannot do it. They will be a train wreck again this year. You cannot bring in a bunch of mercenaries. Kids just think that they're going to go there and play for Deion, who's obviously a famous football player and an old, and get to the NFL. You can't do it that way. I don't think that's going to work, even though they got Shador, who's unbelievable at quarterback, and obviously Travis Hunter is tremendous. It's not enough. They don't have enough linemen, etc., and they haven't built. And Deion walked into a train wreck too. It's not all on him. The former staffs there at Colorado, really bad. The administration kind of led them down the wrong path. But you can't just take 30-some kids, and they still need more to make it. You're not going to do that. So I think Colorado's at 4.5 on the over-under on FanDuel for this season. It's probably about right. Give or take 5 wins this year for them, and I think that's true. Here's the story that I keep getting more bits and pieces about this. Be careful for what you ask. Well, I can't give names. There's a school that just recently took a few players that had an agent, not like a normal agent, a street agent, and got smoked. Not only did the players leave, they lost out on opportunities to get other players. Okay? This is one of those things that it's ridiculous. You have to do your due diligence and bite your tongue no matter how talented the players are, because it can screw up your culture. When kids have an agent, that's one thing. If it's a professional agent or something like that, street agent kind of guys, not so much. I don't care if he's going to get you 20 sacks. The answer is automatically got to be no. So players under this agent go to a certain school. After they're enrolled, all the money in the NIL is settled, allegedly. Agent says we need more. Again, this is after they are enrolled. That's ridiculous. Coach said goodbye, see you later, which was the right move. Saved his locker room. However, what could he have got with those 3-4 guys, with those scholarships? The opportunity to get that same level of player is gone. Was it all the coach's fault, etc.? Probably not. But somebody messed up along the way. You cannot waste scholarship opportunities. Just want to use this as kind of a generic here. Not going to go into too many specifics, but this is why I think Florida State has figured it out. Not saying this couldn't happen to Florida State, but I haven't heard anything like it. If you're going to make a decision to take kids that are really, really good, they got somebody around them, you better know darn well if that guy is going to try and get one over on you after they're enrolled. this is a lesson. So if you look at it like, let's use Texas. They have a lot of NIL money. I'm sure there's been somebody try to sweat them for extra. I haven't heard anything on them specifically, to be honest. And they've managed their portal options really well with high school. They do a good job, kind of like Florida State, and that's why they were in the playoff last year. They're a good program. But at the same time, they got 3 receivers. One's tight end / receiver, Niblack from Alabama, Isaiah Bond from Alabama, and, Bolden, like, they got all kinds of guys. He's the guy from Oregon State, Silas Bolden. 3 guys that are really good, but they've recruited really well at the high school level for a receiver too. Is that going to work? I don't know. It's one thing to bring in guys that are developmental from the portal and blend, and whoever wins the job wins. But when you bring in known commodities, I'm curious to see if guys like Jonte Cook and some of the other elite players they signed in the last couple of years are going to be able to handle that. How's that going to work? Maybe they just took a shot on it because they got a senior quarterback that's experienced and are like, we're all in. We got a chance to win the national title this year. And they do. But I think that's risky. And I think that's riskier than what Florida State did. Just my opinion, and it could certainly work. Texas has a good coaching staff, and they got all kinds of talent, all kinds of speed, but it's risky. Florida State, in general, I just wrote down in my notes, just right fits. I've already said it 3-4 times on this show, but you get a guy like Sean Murphy, who was an elite player coming out of high school at Alabama, hasn't developed. This has been the MO for Florida State. Guys that are really talented, something wasn't worked right, they figured it out, and they coached them up in Tallahassee. You can't really go by, it's mind-boggling how good they've done this, but you can't go by what happened prior to Florida State. I don't know why. Wish I could sell that, because if I could figure that out, I'd make a lot of money. But Florida State, they bottled it up, and they've done a great job with it. Guy has 5 tackles somewhere else who come to Florida State and get 40. Again, why? I don't know. But that's been the MO. Murphy is really talented. 230-pound kid that can run. I'll take all those I can get. And he's probably not one of the top 5 portal guys in my personal projection for this year. Guys like Rodell, Malik Benson, they're really good, and I think they're going to carry the load at receiver and running back in particular. There's other guys too, and they obviously just went out and got a corner, Omarian Cooper, that's familiar. They found ways to find guys that can blend in. They're going to be really, really good. Obviously, Marvin Jones Jr. is kind of top of my board I'm most curious about because he's got so many traits, but he didn't do much either at Georgia. I just have faith in what Florida State has done. Maybe I'm biased because I follow Florida State so closely, but I'll still take Florida State over what I've seen, even at Texas. And their portal class is really good. I'm just worried that it's going to cause locker room problems. Finally, Ole Miss, I think it's unique. I'm a little concerned about one in particular player they took, maybe the best portal player of all in this entire December or spring window, a certain guy from A&M, defensive tackle, who's just a freakazoid, but I haven't heard great things about him throughout his career off the field, so I'm worried about their culture, but they did get a lot of guys. I mean, Ole Miss, their O-line, they got the 2 offensive tackles from Washington, really good football players. They helped them to get to the national title last year. They got Juice Wells, another piece for Lane Kiffin. So if they can blend that together, they're a maybe. But I don't trust Kiffin because his record in big games is just completely horrendous. He's like 1-20 or something. I forget what it is against top 5 teams. He needs to prove he can win big games. Bama's down a little bit. LSU's got no defense. A&M's in transition. Missouri's on the come up, but Georgia's still Georgia. Auburn's not that great. Florida's not that great. They got a chance to make the college football playoff and even be a top 8 seed. But these portal additions got to mesh, and I'm not sure. So out of all these, I think Florida State is the safest pick amongst that group. It's just my opinion, but I have a solid theory on it based on the cultures at Georgia, Florida State, Michigan. The teams that are winning big, they select from the portal, take guys that they develop, and they don't overpay for them. It's the same basic theory at all the schools. Michigan just won the title. Georgia won the 2 prior to that. Florida State had a regular season last year that was undefeated. This is a proven commodity that I'm using. It's not my idea. I'm just following what everybody else did as success. And I think it's going to lead Florida State to more success this season and beyond. Thank you very much for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Please hit that like button and that subscribe, and make sure that you share this podcast whenever you can, rate and review, and comment on YouTube. Everybody have a great day. Thank you very much.